My name's Starsky and welcome to From the Studio on Clubbing TV. Today I'm going to be taking a look at what's essentially the grandfather of all modern mono-synths. It's the synth by which every synth has been judged since the 70s. It's the Moog Minimoog. Hi, today I'd like to take a look at what's essentially the grandfather of all modern mono-synths. It was invented back in the 70s. Pretty much every synthesist in the 70s used to play one. Every band that had a synth had one. It's the Moog Minimoog, and it's the standard by which every mono-synth since has been judged. So what makes the Minimoog so iconic? It's not just the sound, but it's what it represents. When it first came out, Bob Moog realised that you could take what was essentially a great big wall's worth of huge modular synthesis, and you could sort of refine it down into the basic parts. We've got an oscillator bank, a mixer, modifiers to change the sounds, and a sort of output section with some controllers as well. And if you look at these, it sort of looks like modular sections, doesn't it, from an old modular synth. So it represents a move from huge, great modular systems into sort of desktop-based synths. Synths you could carry around, synths you could take to a gig without having about 5 different roadies to sort of set it up. So if you look at the control panel, you've got an oscillator bank. It looks like something from an old modular. You've got a mixer section, again, looks like something from an old modular. And the modifiers, you've got the filter, you've got a filter envelope, you've got a loudness envelope, and then you've got the output section. All with a control section that allows you to sort of do all sorts of clever stuff without having to plug and patch lots and lots of cables in. And what Moog realised was that the basic setup of any modular system was getting some oscillators, putting them through a mixer, taking them from the mixer, putting them through a filter, and then modulating the filter and the loudness with an envelope. And that's what we've got here. Really simple, but massive palette of tones. So you'll have heard the Minimoog on countless tracks over the years. From when it was first conceived, you had all the sort of prog rockers that could twiddly on it. And all of them could play much better than me, to sort of leading, I don't know, into the 70s and early 80s, and you had sort of a Gary Newman, sort of a... to something more recent, like the Rude. Just have a look at that. Up, down, and round about here. Quite difficult to play live. They're all quite difficult for me to play live. So let's take a look then and see how we can build a sound from something really sort of simple to something a bit more complex using such a simple interface. And you look at this and you sort of feel like you've entered a bit of a time machine. I mean, you've got a TV, your TV doesn't look anything like it did in the 1970s. Your phone definitely doesn't look anything like it did in the 70s. A computer doesn't look anything like it did in the 70s. A light bulb doesn't look anything like it did in the 70s. But this has sort of stood the test of time. It does feel like you're sort of using some sort of H.G. Wells time machine or something in a way. It's got a really nice, beautiful interface that's a real pleasure to use, and you just really want to grab hold of it and start playing with stuff. So let's, as I say, let's kick off just with a single oscillator and then start playing about and see how we can make it sound a bit more interesting. So I'm going to start off with just a simple sawtooth on oscillator 1, so all these are turned off. It's a nice sound, it's a nice tone, but it's not doing much. So what makes a synth sound like a synth? I suppose it's the filter. And the Moog ladder filter is probably the most famous of all filters. It's so smooth and sort of squelchy. And then we've got this resonance, which sort of gives a little peak at whatever frequency this knob's tuned to. And that's just sort of really typical, juicy sort of sounding synth, isn't it? Gorgeous. So when you hear sounds like that, we think, well, wouldn't it be nice to change that over time? So we use this contour here. And all of a sudden, from this sort of early 1970s machines, we're getting sort of real weird sort of acid lines, aren't we? So these three knobs here are changing the filter over time. So make that longer. Make it shorter. And adjust the amount that this is affecting this. So you can hear how that works. I mean, I'm doing sort of more extreme examples there, but wow. So to get maybe a longer tone, we can add a bit of loudness contour to it, put a bit of decay on, turn the decay on over here. So we can easily get into the realms of sort of nice, mellow little lead lines. Sounds quite nice, doesn't it? But you don't normally hear just a raw sound in a track. You'd probably put something like a reverb on. I'm going to stick this. It's called the Strymon Big Sky, and it's a really, really beautiful effects pedal for doing sort of really lush sounding reverbs. Absolutely gorgeous it is. So let's put that on. Amazing, isn't it? That's absolutely gorgeous. So that sounds really beautiful, and that's just a single oscillator. So let's fatten things up a bit by bringing in the second oscillator. So oscillator one on its own. And let's add a second. And now we can make things really fat by just detuning that slightly. Listen to this. It's got that real sort of Gary Newman style sound, hasn't it? That thing I played earlier, it's just two oscillators, slightly detuned, both playing sawtooths. And we can tune oscillator 2. And it just instantly sounding beautiful, isn't it? Let's try sticking a little bit of reverb on that as well. All sounds amazing, and there's plenty of stuff you can do with a second oscillator. I played the Rude earlier. Let's look at that again. So stick oscillator 1 on a square, I think. Oscillator 2 a couple of octaves below and detune again. Really fat sounding, isn't it? And then we've got a third oscillator as well. So really, really big tones from this. All slightly out of tune, but you know. Gorgeous. So there we've got some basic sounds, you know, and all I want to do now is start playing with it and just sit here all day really. But we'll move on and I'll play some modulation. So how do you get sort of wobbly tones from it? And the original just used the third oscillator to that. It's got a low mode. Play with the modulation wheel. And that's using this oscillator, this wave shape, to make that wobble. Put it on a square. A ramp and a sawtooth and a triangle. Again, I'm doing really sort of mad effects here, you know, it's not what you'd necessarily do on a track. So let's do it with the filter, shall we? Put the filter modulation on here. Bit of reverb. By increasing the oscillator 3 frequency from the low mode into sort of the normal sort of audio rates. Gorgeous. And really complex sounds from a really sort of not a complex looking synth. So we've gone from really simple, beautiful sort of lead sounds to sort of more harsh sounds like the Darude sound or the Gary Newman into full on spacey effects, all from this really simple layout. And the big thing about the Moog is that it just sounds beautiful. Everything you play on it sounds fantastic. And the one last trick it's got up its sleeve is this overload circuit you can see here. So what they used to do in the olden days was bring the headphone socket out and bring it in to the filter in, but we can do it sort of internally on this using this external input volume knob here. So I've set up a really simple tone. And let's bring in this external input volume, so the feedback loop. Pretty good. Jesus. I know it's mad again. I'm going over the top to demonstrate it, but really thick and beautiful, that, isn't it? Take that out again. Bring it in. Wow. It's so nice. So all in all, a really, really flexible little synth. Sounds amazing. Pry it out of my dying hands. It's the best thing I've got. I know it's really simple, just one note at a time, and it's £3,000, but you'll find these in studios across the world. Well, I hope that sheds some light on why the Minimoog was one of the most revered synths of all time. And if you enjoyed that, check out my YouTube channel, Starsky Carr, where I've got a lot more in-depth and technical reviews, demos, walkthroughs and comparisons of synths, drum machines and general studio tech. And don't forget, you can always catch this episode again on Clubbing TV's YouTube channel in their From the Studio playlist. And drop me some questions in the comments there if you have anything to ask, and I'll answer them if I can. See you next time in the next episode of From the Studio.